There we go.
All right, we are live. Good
Hello.
evening, everybody. Welcome to Old Gray Bricks Thursday night. We have a small room tonight. Seems like a lot of people are on vacations, visiting families, or doing various other things. So we've got Matthew and Jeff and Magnus and John with us this evening. And in the chat, Gary Mullane, hello, and Brick Bunnies TV, hello. So
Don't forget me.
Small Paul in the house.
Ireland, that's going to be pretty late.
Yeah, that's
1 a.m., right?
Probably.
It's about 5 hours. I think it's a 5-hour time difference to the East Coast.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well,
So
we can ask Gary.
I've
Gary, what time is it?
volunteered to be the guest host for tonight with Chris out of town. And me being a teacher, I'm used to standing up in front of people and talking. So I'll at least help to direct the traffic. Although John does a lot of talking to people as well. So before we get started, actually, I wanted to take a moment and talk about Matt. So one of the things that happened is he brought out his giant G.I. Joe, replica or representation. And I took a picture of him and, posted on Facebook and, tagged him in it. And so other people picked it up. So tell us a little bit about people who are seeing your work for the first time in the G.I. Joe community, which might be more action figure oriented.
Well, thank you. I've been building Lego G.I. Joe for about 10 years now, and within the G.I. Joe community, there are a few other people who do a bit of that, but no one's really done as much as I have. And I've never quite known I feel welcome, but I don't know quite sort of where my spot is there. But I've been getting a lot of attention and love for the Silent Castle that you took a picture of at Brick Fair week and a half ago. One of the people who reposted it was Larry Hama, who's the guy who's behind the G.I. Joe comic, basically, and as far as I can tell, designed that castle.
Holy shit, Magnus, did he really?
Yeah, he
I didn't know
reposted
that. That's dope.
Yeah, he reposted it. And he just said, I'm impressed. That's all he said. But that's certainly, that's all he needed to say, really. I was thrilled about that. I feel it's really fun to get that. Like, I wish I had the interior ready to show people as well. But that can be a project for next year.
Well, that's awesome. One of the cool things about Lego is that it can cross into different fandoms. Obviously, they have the license for Star Wars, and so there's a ton of Star Wars stuff. But one of the builders that I follow on Facebook is a British guy, Scottish guy, and he does a lot of modular stuff, which is why I originally followed him. His name's Barry Crofton, and he runs container ships, and so he's gone for like 3, 4, 5 months, and then he comes back and he builds. And when he builds something really big. And so he's working on a Lego, very large Star Trek Enterprise. And he's posted some pictures of like trying to get the curve right, building the infrastructure to have the correct shape of the saucer part, which of course, building something round in Lego is always challenging. And so, that's one of the fun things about Lego is, it can potentially cross into lots of different fandoms. It doesn't just have to be something that Lego has the intellectual property to make specific things for. And let's jump over to John for a second. So now Lego has a formal link with Disney, but I'm suspecting you started working on some of your Disney creations before that alliance was formed. Is that correct?
Well, it's kind of. But I mean, the Disney licenses have been on and off, right? Like,
okay.
Disney existed before. With the basically Fabuland scale figures. So we've had Disney on and off. But yeah, I've been building Disney MOCs since I joined the AFOL community back in the 90s, back in the early 2000s. So like it's been my geekdom since then. It's where the two geekdoms collide, just like Magnus. Like Magnus geeks out about G.I. Joe, particularly comics and the animation, and I'm like, I geek out about Disney stuff. So of course the two start to collide really quickly. Yeah, if you give me a little bit, I could probably dig up some of my earliest Disney MOCs that are dusty and multicolored because the white bricks have weathered so long in them.
So I'll confess, I didn't realize that the Fabuland was a Disney linkage or Disney property.
So what ended up happening was some of the Fabuland molds were then reused in Mickey Mouse sets that were
Okay.
the same scale.
Huh.
And there was a bucket. There were a couple of other things. So you'll sometimes run across Mickey figs that, here's your standard Mickey, and it's like at roughly Fabuland scale like this.
Okay.
Has hip articulation and arm articulation. That's about it. Mickey wearing a ball cap because he's a mechanic, that kind of stuff. So there've been some Disney Disney lines before the ones that we're used to right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Of course, obviously Disney has lots of great properties with various cartoon characters, and then lots of storylines like the dwarves and the Snow White and the 12 dwarves, and lots of classic stories, European sort of fairy tales that get converted into
Wait.
How many dwarves?
12, 15, I don't remember.
7. There are
Oh,
7.
was it just 7?
It's just 7.
So I have a side tangent with the Snow White thing. So in college, I took a class on ancient rhetoric. It was part of my classics major. And one of the things that the instructor talked about is there was a rhetorical device where you would praise something that people usually blame, or blame something that people usually praise. And so each of us were assigned to give a 2 to 3 minute speech in which we would, do something surprising, right? And so the true highlight of the show was one of the students got up and explained that Snow White's mother was the true heroine of the story, because Snow White was cavorting with 7 dwarves, and she had to poison Snow White to preserve the family's honor and reputation. And we were all dying laughing. I mean, it was very clever and funny at the same time. So taking that sort of classic children's story and turning it on its head was amusing. So.
Let me interrupt you for just 1 second, Matthew. We had more people show up in the chat, so we want to say Andrew Sada, Seth Bland, Mr. Blue is here, Anib Productions, I hope I said that right. Stever is here, and Two Humble Bricks. Hello, and thank you for joining the show this evening.
All right, and coming back to our Lego crossing into fandoms that they don't necessarily have a license for, Mark and Paul were showing us a Godzilla-related item, a Rodan. I don't know if he still has the Rodan. Does Small Paul show up?
Why don't you bring what you've got in your hands over here, and then you can also get Rodan. He's in Godzilla heaven right now. So this Godzilla, here's the. Let me blow him up for you. Here's Big G himself.
Nice.
Now, this Godzilla design is Brick 101 on YouTube. Had instructions for this one.
Okay.
So I used their instructions. Yeah, I used their instructions for this model. And go get Mecha.
It looks pretty good.
Yeah.
The stuff out there really works.
I didn't have enough of the gray cheese slopes to do this, so I used Trans Blue, so he's charging up his atomic breath.
Okay.
And Godzilla too.
Yeah, I used the same skeleton from the other Godzilla, but made a Mecha Godzilla. The skin of this one I just sort of made myself to make it look like Mecha Godzilla. And of course, he's got extra lasers and things as Mecha Godzilla tends to do, and a Rock Raiders drill on his tail.
Ooh.
So you got to have that.
He also has
Very-
lasers on his shoulders.
Very
And rocket
intimidating.
fingers.
Yeah,
Laser-
rocket fingers. Yeah, he's got all the stuff.
Laser eyes.
And a
not
shiny
bad.
belly button.
Backbeat.
What were you gonna go get? Okay, so we've got Godzilla and Mecha Godzilla were the first 2 things that I built.
Now read the second two.
Okay, carefully. It's the Small Paul Show.
Almost Dragon of the Week. It's got to happen.
All right, so we also have a Kong. We got a Kong because
Nice.
Kong versus Godzilla was
Godzilla
came out a little while back.
It's
With
Godzilla.
opposable thumbs, I see.
Godzilla versus Kong. I had it backwards. I'm sorry. Rawr. This Kong was a. I
There goes the
based this Kong off of the design from Chubby Bots, because Chubby Bots posted a video, but his Kong was all brown, and I didn't have a lot of the pieces he used, so I made Kong in mostly black brick. He's got dark gray for his fingers and toes.
It reads well. The colors read well. The one thing I noticed that I like about the mouth is that you put the tooth parts so that the tooth is on the outside and the upper, and obviously they're on the lower jaw have the teeth pointing up, but it really looks good.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
that's
his mouth. That's beautiful.
Hi,
So,
I'm
and we've got
I'm
Rodan.
a fire chicken.
Yeah.
As a pteranodon of some sort.
I call him
Yeah.
Rodan the fire chicken.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Bird. He's also kind of flamey.
Okay. Rodan is supposed to be a giant pterodactyl, and we just lost a leg there, buddy.
Oh no!
He'll never land.
Is that how Rodan bombs Godzilla? Drop a leg on him.
Sure. So yeah, we've got Rodan, and of course his wings move, and he can do the wing action there. So
Quite posable.
His mouth also opens. Just that you gotta be careful.
yeah,
Hold the head.
you can open his mouth a little bit too.
Let me
There
get
you
the
go.
beams.
Very nice.
So yeah, that's what's big in small
get
pole
beams.
world right now. Oh yeah, he wants to show you that he's got a bunch of brick stacked
Mechagodzilla.
so that you can do atomic breath for Godzilla and energy breath for Mechagodzilla. Is that right?
Now the thing is, I made up. Well, there's a thing
Okay.
in Godzilla vs. Hedorah
It's pretty much like this. There
where
you go.
Ooh,
Godzilla is flying backwards with his atomic breath, and he's like,
That's how it goes.
Backwards.
Mark,
Wow.
is this the first,
I
is this
thought
the
it was
first
more
time
like-
you've mixed
I thought it
Godzilla
was-
and Lego, or like have you played with this before, or
Godzilla and
Yeah,
Lego.
all of this was the first time I've done Godzilla stuff with Lego
that's cool.
because
It
it.
reminds me of the Zoids, the Zoidzilla, and
Zoid's wild.
yeah.
He's watched Zoid's cartoon on Netflix, so.
I love it.
Buddy. All right, let's transport some of this back over to the small pole side of the room.
And the other, I don't know if Jeff has anything that's like non-official. We'll come back to Jeff after he's had a chance to masticate. But Mark has also done some other things, and I don't have no idea if these are handy, so I'm just doing this on the fly. But Mark built a pretty fantastic transformer well before Lego put one out, and if I remember correctly, it comes into 5 parts that all transform. Is my
Oh
memory
yeah,
correct?
I built my own version of Voltron.
Okay.
Gosh, back in 2009, I think it was, and it's in a bin, so I can't access it right now because it's
Sure.
buried in a pile of stuff over there. But it's more what I would say roughly minifig scale, so it stands about 3 feet tall at the top of his wings. But
It's impressive.
there are pictures of it on Flickr, so that's something that can people can check out.
The other thing that I seem to recall you bringing to one of our lug meetings, did you bring the Pac-Man screen that one time?
No, Pac-Man.
Okay, that wasn't you.
I haven't
Okay.
built the Pac-Man.
He's built a Mario. Show
Jeff,
him.
what about you? You have some Lego crossing into unofficial fandoms or not
Oh,
licensed
yeah,
fandoms?
absolutely. So I guess it kind of counts as a licensed product now, but like picked up like one of these from Atlanta Brick Company,
Nice.
and now I'm making a lot of them, mostly so that my totally not Space Marines from Aliens, but definitely Space Marines from Aliens can shoot them up. So like went into like a lot of like deep lore about stuff and trying to do the damn thing, and it's not working right now, and that's okay. Maybe. All right. Huh?
You guys want to see how?
Nothing.
Do you have any ambition to do like either the ground vehicle from Aliens or the
Yes.
lander vehicle? Okay.
Yeah, both of those are going to be happening at one point pretty soon. So, the smart gunners all have an eyepiece of some sort. I never knew what that eyepiece was for until I read some books and was like, oh, that eyepiece is to identify friend or foe. So
Are you
we
gonna
did
Are you gonna
that.
add a flame element for the?
Plane element? What do you mean?
flame. So like when in some of the scenes in Aliens, when they're told they're not allowed to use the cartridges or the ammunition, they start using the flamethrowers.
Well, it's for the smart guns I have. So in my
Was
head,
it this book, Jeff? Is this the book you read?
yeah. But also a couple of the novels. But so the idea is that, like, in Jeff's world of Aliens, it's not right when the stuff on whatever the planet is. So they got like limited energy weapons now, and stuff like that. And
So are you saying you're developing an Aliens world before or after the movie takes place?
after the second movie takes place, and
After the second.
Yeah, after the second and third. Like, I wanted to build, like, what do the Colonial Marines look like 100 years later? They know about the xenomorphs. In some circles, they know about the predators. So, like, how would they combat that? You can't do it with bullets, So I was thinking, like, some of them, their smart guns have been rigged up, and, they're going to have a mech to, even the odds, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I too am a huge fan of Alien and Aliens franchise, and so I purchased the instructions made by the two Spaniards to build this about 1.5 foot tall alien figure. And I was extremely skeptical that it would actually remain standing, but it does, much to my pleasure, much to my shock and happiness. It does actually stand up. So it's been standing since last summer and hasn't fallen over yet. So I'm very pleased with that.
Is it basically using its tail as a sort of tripod, a third leg to give it structure?
The tail is not weight bearing, so it's using those click it hinges to prevent it from the ball and socket pieces, to keep them from just rotating too far. They're using the click it hinges to hold it steady. The one structural issue that sometimes comes up is right at the ankles. They have a cheese wedge put in there, and the weight is supposed to lean on the cheese wedge. And in mine, it pops out. But even if it pops out, the thing doesn't fall over. So it's kind of annoying. Every time I've moved it, some of those cheese wedges have popped out of the place. And sometimes I have to reattach it at the ankle joint, but it still hasn't fallen over, much to my pleasant surprise. I had low expectations for the stability of it. And I was kind of like, one morning I'm going to walk in here and it's going to be on the ground in a jillion pieces, but that has not happened. So a tip of the hat to, I think it's the Edco brothers who designed it, because it's beautiful, and it's hard to build, something that uses that, has such thin joints and keep that stability. So I'm impressed.
Should we say hi to Fazoom, who's over in the chat, figuring out how to use the chat finally after a 1.5 years of pandemic?
Hey, Fazoom.
We'll see how fast he can type. Well, Jeff, one of the alien things that I have in the back of my mind that I would love to build, and who knows if it'll happen, but I'd like to build a Nostromo. So the giant mining vessel with all the towers and greebles and rounded pieces on the bottom. And I've been collecting some of those Death Star dome pieces that were in sets about 10 years ago, with the idea that I would put some of those in the bottom of a Nostromo build. But I haven't built a lot of space since I was a kid. So, it's a pretty big ship, and there's a lot of detail depending on what scale you do it at. Obviously you could do it at a smaller scale, but it's still, to get the effect of it having all this industrial, I would want to build it at least at a semi decent size, so you could put lots of detailing into it.
Well, that's when I started doing what I'm doing with all this, I was like, man, how do I do this in minifigure scale? Because I do want to build the dropship. I do want to build the ground vehicle. I do want to build those things. And as you all know, I am not a large builder. I am a guy that builds tiny things with lots of details. So I've been looking at stuff, and then Brickham's Builds was like, hey, I have instructions for this APC. And I was like, hey, cool. And then he sent them to me. And now I'm going to use that for the APC part at least. The flyer is beyond me currently. As a builder, I just know that I can't make all the moving parts work. So that's where I'm at. So But everything else though, like the minifigures and like the supporting, like
You mean the
I don't
drop
know,
ship? The drop ship?
the drop ship.
That thing's big. Like, I mean, it has this funny thing with the rocket things that kind of come out like that. If you did that at minifig scale, it would be very large, I think. So have you thought of perhaps trying it out at a smaller scale just to get used to how that would work and then scaling it up to minifig scale later?
It's a plan. I've been building it on Space Engineers, the video game where you can build spaceships and stuff too. So like that's been helping out a lot with how I've been building. But yeah, so the idea is to build those, not colonial but totally colonial Marines. And I've showed these guys a couple of times the space miners that will encounter the xenomorph like hatchery.
Put your hand
So,
behind it, Jeff.
So they've got like big fuck off drills and little drills and everything else. And there's like a guy with a scanner and stuff like that. So I wanted to make it as different as I could from what I would usually do, which was use these guys in their normal stuff with their normal rigs. But like the Next Ignite shoulder pads work great because that represents like their power source, right? So you keep the scale, you keep the color scheme going where like they have energy conduits all over their gear representing that they're powered. So that's what I was just trying to do. Same with the blue on the smart guns and everything else. Just it's the little things that make the bigger-ish build add up. Just like, holy crap, he took the time to do that, and that's what I'm shooting for.
Mark, I think you had a visual aid there.
It was just the dropship. I have an action fleet toy of the dropship, non-Lego, but that's the dropship.
So I have a nerdy question. When did the term dropship first start becoming used in a common way among nerdy circles? Is that an alien thing, or when did that start?
All right.
So in Aliens, the sequel, they established that it's 57 years later from the first film. The Colonial Marines were formed at that time, but they were never featured. The way that they did things, according to the films and the lore, was that they used pods and dropped the Colonial Marines in that way. And then once they realized that our survival rate is like 30%, maybe we should find a different system. So the dropship itself, it's not designed to be like, make these tight turns and do these corners and hover. That is, they're designed to be a brick that falls through the sky and then can take off again. And if need be, nuke the site from orbit. So that's why Bishop, when he was at the platform, had to go because he was like, I can't stay here because this thing's not made for that. So he like circled around as best as he could. But the dropships came about like 50 years prior to Alien 2. And
No, I guess I wasn't quite just asking about the Alien franchise. I was talking about the term dropship in general nerdy sci-fi nomenclature. Is that a term that came into popularity with the Aliens movie, or is that when did we start talking about dropships? As like everyone knows what a dropship is, right? But like when did that start happening? And Bandit, thank you for your comment about my Cobra base. Thank you so much. That warms my heart. I put a lot of work into it. So
Magnus, I want to show you. I want to show you one of my favorite tools. Mark, if I'm sharing screen right now, if you can.
Yeah, we see it.
This is it's Google's Ngram viewer, so it lets you track over time the rate at which words are used in Google's scanned book library.
Wow.
So it looks like the concept of dropship starts becoming popular right in the 1970s, right? 60s, 70s, right in that sci-fi boom that happens there, and then really takes off after 2000.
John, it occurs to me that 68, 70, that's Vietnam War, and you've got soldiers being dropped off by helicopters. I'm guessing that's influenced by helicopter warfare.
Yeah, and that would make perfect sense as AirCap. Yeah.
And the Avatar movie, which some people like and some people don't like, but one of the things I liked most about it was that it was very intentionally trying to echo the visual cues from American perspectives on the Vietnam War with the sort of helicopter / dropship things. Like it was very much drawing that parallel.
when Chris leaves us the stream, Matt and I will go edgy nerdy really, really quick. Yeah.
Well, I actually want to come back for a second to something Jeff was talking about, which was the vehicle on the ground and aliens. And Jeff, I don't know if you might have already thought of this, but it strikes me that the Lego version of the Batmobile 1989 movie, that at least the front corner and the on the wheels might actually be something you could borrow or steal from, at least for that part of the vehicle. It kind of has that curved front and it's rounded, and then it kind of levels off over the wheelbase. So, and I am not a car guy, so if I'm wrong about this, just say so. But it seems to me that there might be some elements in there that might be transferable to a alien's ground vehicle. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but Jeff's either thinking or he's looking it up right now. Jeff,
I totally missed the question. I'm sorry. What was it?
Oh, I was saying that the 1989 Batmobile, the front corners of it strike me that there's a family resemblance between that Batmobile, which Lego has now made as a set, and the front corners of the ground vehicle and the aliens, that you might be able to transfer some design elements. Or nope, you don't think so?
I mean, if you wanted to build a dropship, that's a good place to start looking on how to do it. But as far as like prop making and stuff, the two are first cousins at best. I know some of the guys that worked on Aliens for the miniatures worked on 89 Batmobile for some stuff, but not a lot of stuff. So I don't know. No.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about as a group today is just throw this out, which is changing as a builder, evolving as a builder. And in particular, is there anything that for you personally was a step up? That you were like, okay, I'm building at this level and I now incorporated X or Y, and now I feel like I've reached a different level in terms of construction. So anyone want to take a stab? Or
so hanging out with you jerks, I could never really build a good looking mech before.
Okay.
But when Cy ran his mech march thing or whatever, it was while I was with you guys for hanging out and learning from you guys, and I was able to make 2 mechs for the contest, which was one was Aquanaut related, and the other one was Aqua Sharks. But I'd never think to be able to do something like that. Like, it's mostly modular buildings and Chris, and superhero related scenes. So that was like once I did that, like building. Because they were horrible. They were blocky. They didn't move. They were just like, this should work. But like when I built this is the first compact little minifigure scale thing I can do, and I was just happy with it. I still am happy with it, and it's probably one of my favorite builds. And then going from this to other things to doing the whole Colonial Space Marine thing and giving more detail to the minifigures that I have in a scene is, I think, in the direction that I would really like to be going in as far as it comes to my build. Because, I'm not tooting my own horn or anything like that, but, I can build a silly sci-fi background that, looks good for government work, right? So, the next thing to do is just, get those minifigures to beyond that level. So oh yeah, it's a great background, but man, that guy looks cool. That's what I'm going for. So, even now, the 2 construction workers I have are completely unique and different. One's got a rebreather on because that is leaking something and it looks bad. So, but just stuff like that, being able to add the small detail to things that I like doing has been a really big help. You, Matt, for instance, when you're showing off modulars, I'm paying attention to that because I like those style of buildings and I want to be able to do something like that for the most part. And, I talked to John privately a couple of weeks ago about small stuff and details. And when he gave me that validation of, that looks good, you should really be doing more with that, that told me I'm going the right way. So that's just all I've got.
Well, and Jeff, kind of going off of that one, to push through to your question, Matthew, it's when I got out of college, and got into grad school, I was in the DC area, and so I had access to Lego stores. I had disposable income from a job for the first time, right? Like, and so what I thought was I wanted to build big, and so it was right when the town plan came out, and I went, oh, I could spend the money on the town plan, or I could go to the Pick a Brick wall and buy brick for the same amount of money and build something huge and that I'd be happy with. And I build huge buildings. They're sitting over there on a table right now, waiting to be made into a layout that will probably never happen. But it took a long time for me to realize that you don't have to build big to build cool. And so that's the next shift that happened with me. So like I went through these two interesting phases as kind of a disposable income AFOL. The first one being I want to build big because I've been watching people build big for a decade. And I wanted to move away from, this stuff. This is one of those old mocks of Space Mountain rock vehicle. And the Flying Dumbo. And I wanted to move away from some stuff that was small towards stuff that was big. And then I realized that, no, if I go small and just really focus on it, it can be just as fun and just as engaging and just as challenging too. It's more fun sometimes to build small than big. So those, as a builder, that's kind of been my maturing process, right? Of going, I don't have to build big to build cool.
One of the challenges of building big is building well, keeping up the quality along with the quantity, whether you're building a large structure or a sprawling diorama. If you have the time and money and storage space to be able to build big, that's great. But a less detailed big build that is big is sometimes more. The fact that it is less detailed is more conspicuous because it is so big. It's taking up so much space. And if it's just a little bit needs a little more polishing, if it's taking up a ton of tables, then people are going to notice if it's just not quite up to snuff.
And the other thing about building big is that it definitely has trade-offs. So it consumes area in your house, whether you have a designated room or not. And it eats up a lot of brick, so if you have constraints in terms of how much brick you have and you commit it all to something that's really huge, that can definitely prevent you from maybe doing some of the things you might want to do with your construction brick. So there's definitely trade-offs when you start doing large scale projects.
Oh yeah.
Well, Mark, you've been building forever. Do you have any moment where you felt like you transitioned or you learned a trick that you didn't know before and you felt like things got more complex or more sophisticated? Or
that's kind of I don't think I have one moment like that. It's because since I was around in the early days of LugNet and sharing photos and that kind of thing, I probably had weekly moments like that where the cross-pollination of ideas and things that we were posting constantly on LugNet back in the day, we were I was constantly learning something from somebody else about how to put bricks together differently, because at the time of there was kind of a lot of parts advancement at the same time as the LugNet days. It all happened together because it was around 2000 that I joined LugNet. And around that time, Star Wars sets came out, and the Star Wars sets were coming out with a lot of new snot bricks, like 1x4 snot bricks, and the bracket pieces. Like a lot of the early Star Wars sets had a ton of these bracket pieces. A lot of these were used in early Star Wars sets, and those parts coming out in all those sets at the same time really allowed a lot of us to start building things sideways, which just adds extra dimension and shaping possibility to all the stuff that we were working on and building. So yeah, I mean, it was just there was constantly somebody doing something new and different and novel with the parts and just so
It sounds,
yeah,
it sounds like Lugnet was almost like walking around a convention and people being like, "Oh, how'd you do that?" and "Oh, how'd you do that?" and someone explaining or showing you. But instead of you physically all being in the same space, you were connecting via the internet and being like, "Here's how I did this." It sounds fun.
yeah. I mean, I was just looking on Brickshelf and I have a picture of probably my first spaceship that I posted to Lugnet. So
Ooh, come on, share it.
Yeah.
all right, hang on.
Oh, there's
Okay.
and Pulp Batman's joining us too over there with Jeff.
So this was my first spaceship that I posted on Lugnet, and I photoshopped a background on it because I wanted to look like it was in a scene or whatever. But this is made out of a few Star Wars sets. Like it was, at the time I had just a few, like the Sith Infiltrator and an X-wing fighter and a couple other things, and so it's just this little freighter thing that I cobbled together and.
I like it though. Like
Well,
I
yeah.
really do. Like,
It's mostly studs up, except for the wings that I used hook hinges to, angle the hinges, a little bit.
Right, and you can tell that it's a couple of X-wings and maybe a original Slave One, and there's a couple other sets that are in there. But what I really appreciate about that is that at that moment in Lugnet, we had that burst of parts, right? But we also had a concerted effort in the community to tell stories with models, right? That models were not just something to build; they were something to tell a story. And it really happened. It happened with the stuff you were building, Mark, with the stuff that Chris was building, right? Like there was always story wrapped around everything that was being built. And so like the burst of Star Wars parts didn't lead to thousands of Star Wars mocks. It led to creative storytelling individually on the fly in all of our own little universes, which was really cool.
I think that also that someone was mentioning earlier that Lugnet sounded like going to a con today. And I think that one of the comparable elements is that if you go to a con and you're like a space builder, you'll hang out with the space people and look at the space things, but you're also going to look at the builds other people have built in other themes. And at the time, Lugnet was small enough that unless you were trying very intentionally to be incredibly insular, you couldn't help but seeing what the castle builders were doing or what the town builders were doing. You could learn from them. And similarly, if you go to even a large con like Brick Fair, you will see what other themes are doing. Whereas online today, if you're building in just one niche, you can just hang out in that one niche and not even keep up with everything that's going on in that one building niche. Maybe you subscribe to Brothers Brick, so you get some pictures every now and then, but there's not the same need. There's not the same sort of
Cross-pollination.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think Lugnet was really good at. That you would sort of see what some Technic builder had done, or you'd be like, someone would build something cool out of just some other theme, and you would you'd be reminded of that. And you might learn from that. You might be made a little humble by someone really awesome did in some other theme. I think that was healthy.
Mark, the thing that I sort of noticed looking at your spaceship is to me, it had a little bit of a family resemblance to the Ghost from Rebels, just in terms of kind of some of the curves and the colors, and it looked like I could imagine it existing in the same universe as that. And I actually chuckled at the fact that they were interacting with someone in a top hat on the ground. Like, I don't know what the story is, but it made me chuckle seeing the top hatted minifigure there with the spaceship. So it's good to know there's top hats in the future in science fiction.
Yeah, I just kind of had that little dude there. Like, I think I had him giving some money to the freighter, the freighter captain who dropped something off, just made a little scene out of it.
That's what it looked like to me. It looked like a cargo drop or like a passenger delivery or something. And, here's all my money.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess the fact that it sort of looked like the Ghost is kind of interesting because, I built that probably 15 years before the Ghost ever showed up in Star Wars. But
I was saying more like it could be related. Not that it looked exactly like the Ghost, but it could be made by the same like space manufacturer or something, kind of.
right. Well, but my next thought was going to be that I did play a lot of the Star Wars role-playing game when I was in college.
Okay.
And there was a book from that role-playing game that was called Tramp Freighters. And there were many illustrations in that book that were freighters that looked like the Millennium Falcon, but were sort of a different design or a different permutation of it, based on that kind of circular shape, but it would have like different engines on the back or a different cockpit or that kind of thing. And I absorbed all of that stuff, just kind of, playing that game, looking through the source books and stuff like that. And so the kind of design of that little ship was probably influenced a lot by that kind of, that sort of thing.
The art of the Star Wars universe at the time.
And also the fact that I built it mostly out of Star Wars sets, sort of contributes as well. But
Right. A lot of grays, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that I find interesting is that for me personally, I think of the first wave of Lego Star Wars as being extremely blocky compared to later renders where we get more smoothness or better angles or more color mixes. And so it's interesting to me as somebody who came back to Lego after that point. I probably came back to Lego in kind of like the second generation of Lego Star Wars. Is your perspective of like, hey, look at all these cool new parts. We can run with this. We can do things we couldn't do before. Because my attitude when I look back at those like 1999, 2000, 2001 sets is I was like, oh, they're so square. Like, they're so rectangular. Like I want more of a curve or more of a I want more angles and colors and stuff like that. But it is interesting, like in different points in time, the perception that you have, and it was different for you guys at that point.
This was before curved slopes were even a thing. I mean, people were just excited at the time that like when episode 1 was coming out, before we'd seen episode 1, we thought it was going to be good, and we were excited about it. And like the fact that Star Wars and being a Star Wars nerd was kind of mainstream in a cool way, and Lego was making Lego Star Wars, I was just excited about that it was happening. And I don't remember thinking to myself, how good is this X-Wing look compared to something I could build or compared to like the Space Police stuff? I was just kind of like, wow, Lego is actually making an actual X-Wing. Like that's, maybe they might do an an AT-AT next year. Like that's
right.
Yeah.
Just the fact that like we had just gotten Orange 6 months before the Star Wars line launched, right? Like the color Orange was brand new.
I didn't realize it was that late.
Yeah, this was a very different era in
and dark gray. Dark gray was new.
Yeah,
or fairly new. Dark gray only came out a few years before Star Wars, not very long.
That's true. This was before the color change. Yeah, this was back in the day.
Yeah, and so we're talking about a time where it didn't take much to impress us, right? Like, because.
If you have 6 colors and you go from 6 to 8, that's a big increase, right? I mean, at the time, it feels like a dramatic change.
Right.
Was that after exploring? Which Lego space themes had come out right before Star Wars came out? Was that Spirius or?
This piece was new.
Yeah.
The 2x4 slope was new at the time.
Robo
brand new
Forces.
for the Star Wars sets.
It was Robo Forces or something like that. It only had 3 sets.
With the third monorail, maybe.
That was Utron, and that was at the same time as Spirius and the end of Ice Planet.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you think of like the classic or the post-classic, whatever you call them, the space themes. That you've got the Ice Planet. After Mtron, you have the Ice Planet, and then you have the UFOs and.
But there's talking about that short-lived Robo Dino.
And some of that stuff was just a little less exciting than the stuff from the 90s, like the Blacktron and Blacktron 2 and Mtron. And so, if they hadn't come up with Lego Star Wars, I don't know what Lego Space would have been. But I think that Lego Star Wars was a lot more exciting to most of us than the last couple of waves of Lego Space had been.
Well, speaking for myself, when I was 9 years old, I would have like done a lot to get a Lego Star Wars. That's what I wanted, but that wasn't for sale at the store. So I was buying Classic Space and building my own spaceships. But interestingly enough, as a kid, I didn't ever really try to make a Millennium Falcon or an X-wing because the pieces just didn't seem to be shaped, in a convenient way. So I did build spaceships, but they were always something like completely my own imagination, not necessarily anything from Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, which was then on the television. But as a kid, what I would have done for Lego Star Wars as a 10-year-old, right? I would have been like all over that.
That's funny that you mentioned that because when I was a kid, it was, Star Trek and Star Wars for me, like you guys, but just in a different era and different reasons and whatever else. But like every starship I built, I always built like a bridge scene, a bridge section. And it was like, this is the Enterprise. And then I would build like other parts that connected onto it with a plate and be like, this is the engine room. And, I had to make sure that I had all of the right uniforms. They were all matching, so they all had the NASA jumpsuits with the little shuttle and the blue ones with the pockets and everything. So, and then when it came to Star Wars, my 3rd or 4th grade teacher was like, you can do a book report on whatever you want. And I was like, okay. So I did Splinter of the Mind's Eye, or where, that whole thing. And like my teacher was like, what? Like she's just like, I didn't even know this was a thing. And I was like, yeah, I built a diorama for it because we were supposed to. And I hold up like, the Lego diorama of Luke fighting Darth Vader, aka a Blacktron guy, but with a cape that my mom made for me for the Blacktron guy. And,
Nice.
Yeah, like I had to do school projects like that, and I always came back to Star Wars and was just like, here we go. We had to do a big display, and I was like, I'm going to do Hoth. And my dad, one of the few times that my dad, back then anyway, connected with me, was like, you're going to build Hoth? I was like, yeah, let's go to the store. Okay. And Ice Planet was my theme that I was growing up with. So he bought like all the Celestial sleds that they had on the rack. Like, and he was like, these are your air speeders. Okay. And like totally worked. So
Cool.
yeah.
That was cool.
Your dad separati the Lego store of the Ice Planet just
He
to
took
give
me to
you
Target.
Target.
Yeah. This was back in the 90s. And he was a big science fiction nut. That's where I got all my love for sci-fi and everything else. So,
Okay.
yeah.
My school diorama was not made out of Lego, but I once made the Space Lab, which of course crashed to Earth in the early 80s. But that was my like science diorama thing. Was I had to build a replica of the Space Lab, sadly, that no longer exists.
Did you guys have to build missions in like elementary school or anything like that? Like missions?
Not that I recall.
Oh man, we had to do that, and it was a pain in the butt. And like the teacher was like, "You can only use styrofoam and toothpicks," and I was like, "No." So I asked my teacher, I was like, "Look, lady," I didn't say it exactly like that because I was like 10. But I was like, "Hey, I have a bunch of Lego. Is it okay if I can do it in Lego?" And she was like, "Well, as long as it's the right scale." And I was like, "Well, hell, whatever that means." Okay, so. My dad went over to our friend. My dad was like, "Okay, let's go do some stuff." So we went to my friend's house, where our parents were friends, and those people were super rich, like just absolutely rich. And the kid had gotten all of the old West sets, and like my dad was like, "Let me see him," and like we told him what was going on. He's just gonna borrow them. He's just gonna borrow them. So he took like a couple of the Cowboys, and he took like a couple of the Confederates, or not the Confederate, but the Civil War soldiers, the cavalry. And he was like, "Okay, this mission has been taken over by the cavalry, and you're willing to let people in to protect it." I was like, "Okay, Dad." So like me building the mission that I had planned turned into my dad just going, "Sit there, okay," and then he just built it, and it was epic. And he was like, "There we go." It was one of his 3-month stints when he was back from the Kitty Hawk. So, yeah.
He got excited because there was a military theme, or
No, he just got excited because like when he was a boy, he had like erector sets and everything else, and like
okay.
he's like, no matter through the years, like all the problems that he and I have ever had, every year on Christmas and my birthday, he'll spend $200 on Lego for me, no matter what.
Okay.
And he's always done that since I was a kid. Even now, he's like, "Here you go." I'm like, "Okay." So
My dad
The
would
last
buy me
time-
things that he wanted as a kid. So he got me a race car set when I wanted action figures, and then he got me like the home chemistry kit when I wanted action figures, and then he got me one of those things where it's like you connect the wires and you can make it into a radio kind of thing, like a science lab thing, and I just wanted action figures.
So what action figures were you into? Like, I didn't know you were so into action figures.
Star Wars and a little bit of the Black Hole action figures, and I had a couple of the Battlestar Galactica, but mostly Star Wars. So it was Episode 4, Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and for Return of the Jedi, the only figure I had was the Biker Scout, which was my favorite. And my parents were like, "Aren't you getting a little old for action figures?" And I was like, "No." I still have them all.
My parents and I had that discussion with Lego when I was in middle school. It transpired to them that their son, who was a teenager, was spending most of his pocket money on Lego. There was a little set that I thought was very exciting. It wasn't that big. It was like a little air show set. It was like in red and white and blue, and it had like I think 2 planes and some
that
printed
thing was
tiles.
awesome.
These
Yeah.
printed tiles with stars and stripes on them in the 90s, and I bought it for myself because I thought the printed tiles were cool. And my parents were somehow horrified that I'd spent like $20 on some little set, the medium-sized set. And they started, yes, exactly that set, precisely that set. So at some point, they decided, they were like, Bagus, you're a teenager. You can still play with Lego a little bit, but you need to sort of diversify your interest a little bit and hang out outdoors and do other things. And they came up with some rules that I could only spend certain amounts of my pocket money on Lego. It was this big attempt of theirs to get me to diversify a little bit. But here I am at 43 still building Lego.
I have a Lego room and I have a Star Wars office that's filled with action figures. So did it work? No. It
I
didn't
have
work.
a geek room. You can't really see it that well, but like all of my shelves that I have on this wall in front of me are full of either these or DC McFarlane figures, and like I'm okay. I don't go out and try to get all of the Black Series figures or whatever. I try to go out and get the ones that I really like the Mandalorians and Jaina Solo when she was there, and and then
Look at those Transformers. Look at those Transformers.
Ooh.
So like
Mark's
getting
got
the
his
heavy
Transformer wall.
was like means that I'm
Yeah.
basically done with Star Wars until they give out a Mandalorian version of Luke Skywalker. So yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting. The views of child rearing. I was a nerdy, bookish kid who stayed indoors and read history books. I mean, I wasn't the kid who was like, when my dad was my age, he was like fixing the tractor and learning how to make cars work, and he's very mechanically inclined, and so is my grandfather. I am not mechanically inclined. I have no interest in knowing, honestly. I'm fine taking it to a car repair person, and I will pay them to do that. My imagination was either in the past or in some sci-fi futuristic scenario, and that's where I live. That was my headspace. And the other great irony is that my parents, who had a religious experience when I was 10, they made me give up comic books because of the scantily clad women with large bosoms that were featured in the comic books, and that didn't really work either. Since I wasn't interested in the women, as it turned out. It did not.
Maybe it worked, but not in the way they thought.
Right. It did not propel me into dating girlfriends.
Were there scantily clad men in there that were perhaps equally scantily clad?
There were lots of muscly men in there.
Yeah, like in little shorts and stuff.
Yeah, spandex. How'd you know?
Build a queue. Yes, exactly. I feel like if your kid's in middle school and he's spending money on Lego, like there's a lot of worse things they could be doing with themselves.
Right. Like I wasn't sniffing glue. I wasn't, letting off fireworks in the school parking lot. I wasn't doing any of those like things that were getting the police to stop by our house and ask what Matt was up to. You know, I wasn't one of those kids. I was a good kid. I just like my nerdy stuff. Like, leave me
Whereas
alone. I'm being nerdy.
Jeff was an equal opportunity offender there. You know?
Oh yeah, like cherry bombs and stuff like that. Like in Arizona, I didn't really want to be there, so in my head space of like 6th grade, I was like, if I do enough shit, they'll kick us out, right? So like cherry bombs in the toilet and like, so it was kind of like prison. Like the first day I got there, of course, the school bully starts like picking on me because I'm the fat new kid. So I laid him out on the ground, and like people are like, "Whoa, new kid's a badass," and I'm like, "Nope, just don't want to be here. Just don't want to be here." So I did like little things that would inconvenience people. Like I stole my teacher's mouse ball out of her mouse like every other day, and like hid it around the room. When it came time to like go play sports ball outside, I would always grab the only football, and then I would just sit. And like people are like, hey, you know, are you gonna do anything with it? No.
Mark, are you covering Paul's ears or?
He fortunately went upstairs.
Okay, good.
So like, you know, like fastening like fishing line to another door and stuff like that. I did that a lot. And like when there was like a kid that I hated in the bathroom stall, like I would just do whatever I could do to get as much water in my watertight backpack and just like
See,
You had a watertight backpack.
but the theme here is like social outcasts, right? Like it's just different brands of social outcasts.
Yeah, there's a person who I will not name who is not currently on this video, but people here know who he is, and he told me he peed in a convertible once, and that's how he ended up in jail for a night.
What?
I put a can of sardines that were opened in the car of a guy in high school. I put it underneath his passenger seat because he was stupid enough to leave his window down and he was an asshole. So I was like, karma, and just was like, here you go.
So the most scandalous thing I did in our rural community in the Midwest was we would TP each other's houses, and that's where for anyone who doesn't know, you take rolls of toilet paper and you go in the dark and you throw them over trees, and they're next to impossible to get out until it rains and it like dissolves the toilet paper. And this was started because some other kids in our school came and TP'd our house. Now we had a dog, an outdoor dog, and they were clever, and they brought like livers, and they gave it to the dog. So the dog was like nom 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 nom, you know, occupied, not barking. And they start TPing the trees in our yard, and we had a cow, and our cow was socialized. We would be outside and go over and scratch its nose because it lived right next to our garden area, so we'd see the cow every day. You know, we'd scratch the cow's nose, and it was a very social cow. There was only one cow, and so it would moo at us. So it starts bellowing at dusk, and my mom's like, why is the cow carrying on? And so my dad's like, I don't know. Well, they started flipping the lights on, and they caught our friends TPing the trees, you know. And so my dad, like, you know, turned all the external lights on, and they ran away. So my mother says, are you guys going to get them back? Do you know who did it? And we were like, we'll find out who did it, because, you know, these things don't stay secret. People talk at school. And she's like, well, when you get revenge, I want to go with you.
Your mom went with you?
My mom helped us TP the perpetrators, which were friends of ours. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't terrible or something. It was kind of like a friendly thing to do. So yeah, my mom went with us. We parked the car like half a mile, turned the lights off, and we walked up with our rolls of very cheap toilet paper that we had picked up and threw them over the trees. And she helped us. It was awesome.
Okay, well, the lesson tonight is don't do anything that you just heard on this show. But
and that Mark and I are the lame ones of the group right here.
Yeah, pretty much. But we're coming up on 9 o'clock here, and this is a 1-hour show tonight. Next week, hopefully, Chris will be back and can manage these hooligans because, well, you know, it's miscreants and.
There was only one F-bomb tonight.
Well, it's true. That's. There's usually one allowed. It's a PG-13.
We were pretty good.
Yeah, it's a PG-13 show. So,
but before people leave,
pretty well.
they should hit that subscribe button and ring that bell and push the thumbs
Like
up thing,
it.
right, Mark?
Like and subscribe, ring the bell, and all that good YouTube-y stuff.
And
Also, wear masks so we don't
the
get
other-
fucked when it comes to convention time.
Yeah,
The,
wear a mask.
the other thing is that Chris's dad is doing pretty good. So those of you who've been sending good thoughts his direction, I'm sure Chris would say his thanks for that. And he sent us a picture of his dad was walking around, I think, with a cane. But for someone who just had pacemaker, that's a big deal. So it's a good deal. So happy to convey that news.
Chris is actually visiting his dad today, so that's why he's not here. But his dad's doing well. He's at home. That's all going great. So thank you, everybody, for your well wishes and thoughts for Chris's dad. So that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And as Chris would say, be nice to each other. Wear a mask. Take care of yourselves. Get your shots, and we will see you next time. And there's the Chris Fig from John Scott there in the corner. The Chris Fig is here to say goodbye. Good night, everybody.
Good night.